Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today in the final of our series of the Cybersecurity Awareness month of October. Today, we're joined by Nick Prescott. Nick joins us from a company called Norgine. He holds the role of CISO at that company. And he's very kindly said to us and agreed today to share some of his insights around certainly what he does on a daily basis, how he looks to drive, strategies within his business, and drive that successful, cybersecurity program across the Norgine business. So on that note, I'll hand over to Nick just to give himself a far better introduction than obviously I did, and tell us a bit about the role that he has, the business that is Norgine, what you do, and sort of key considerations, things like that. So Nick, over to you.
Hi, Tom. Hi there, everyone. Thanks for the introduction that you've given me. The role of CISO at Norgine is a challenging one. There are lots of changing dynamics, but one of the really key things is having that automation of detection and detecting, reacting, responding to all the threats that we see in there. And one of the really critical systems that we have is obviously the CrowdStrike portal that we have, and without it, I would be sleeping a lot less at night. I would be far less aware of the threats and the vulnerabilities that happen within our network, and really it fine-tunes our response in terms of making sure that when there is something that happens, our time to detect and react is rapidly reduced. And that's really the key metric that my ELT are really looking for, is being known that if something bad does happen, do we A, know about it, do we B, detect it, and do we C, can we react to it in a timely manner?
Very good, very good. I just want to pick up on one part that you mentioned there, and I think it's a part that or a dynamic that some individuals within sort of security leadership really struggle with, and that's being able to communicate effectiveness or effectively even to your senior leadership and your board as to obviously cyber, but then also the way in which you're measuring that, and being able to sort of address improvements or potential improvements, and then obviously go and ask for investment as well when you see sort of new challenges come up. Have you got any sort of tips for people watching as to how they could best approach the board and help educate if it isn't a top level sort of agenda piece?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when you talk to senior business people, a lot of InfoSec people probably kind of miss the beat in the sense that they aren't knowing what the latest CVSS score on a vulnerability is. They aren't knowing what the tactics, techniques, procedures are of the Lazarus hacking group in North Korea. They are focused on different risk metrics, and those risk metrics are reputation, uptime loss, business ability to trade in business. And I think the role of the CISO is really to take that kind of technical geek speak and produce it into the kind of board language that is really important. And they like to measure it in different ways. We measure it in terms of patching vulnerabilities, keeping systems updated, making sure that the agents on systems are reporting. They talk about it in terms of, are those systems effective? Are they cost effective? Are they within the right risk tolerances and risk appetites within the business? So the role of a CISO is not really to kind of tell them what the latest vulnerability is, because they're not interested. They want to know, if something bad happens, can you get them back up and running, and is their data protected?
Very good, very good. I think that's really important, because sometimes I think that translation gets lost, and then there's frustration obviously at a senior sort of security leadership level that maybe you're not getting the attention and investment in time and obviously funding to then drive a program in the way that you would certainly want to, and that could leave you obviously with risk and exposure to certain risks as well. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting, because my background, I did not do a computer sciences degree at university. I did a history and politics degree, and it's all about telling the story. It's all about, the start, middle, or finish, and it's all about kind of not getting too political about it, but it's about making sure that there's a story that is understood by the audience. And I think that is really so important in terms of making sure that the board understand what you're doing, and what the board responses are going to be.
Yeah, understood. No, really good points there to drive home as well. So when you came to the business, I guess, how did you prioritize on what you needed to do? And as a CISO coming in, I guess, how do you approach, I guess, a new business that you're looking to understand, I guess, priorities and what's important?
I suppose in a way, the three ways you can look at it. First of all, is do we know what assets are on the network, which is the kind of most fundamental thing. Second thing on is, do you have eyes on? And that's a slightly military term, but essentially the CrowdStrike agent on those devices, we know what those devices are doing, right? I didn't have to worry about it; it was there. And the third bit was, if it all goes wrong, what do we do? How do we do it? How do you report upwards? How do you report outwards? And I think really the key, following on from that is, can people elevate their privileges? Can they transverse across the network? And that's almost like the number one thing you want to stop. Then all the other things kind of fall into place. Was my first thing to do was to look at the policy, have a read of it, and then kind of get my red pen out and start trying to recraft it? No, it's all about eyes on the network.
Very good, very good. I think that's really important. And when you joined the business, I mean, were there any key tools that were in place that you got that visibility from? Or was it very much a case of looking for new tooling to give that additional insight?
So the good news was that they had just upgraded their Microsoft 365, but more importantly, they've implemented CrowdStrike, and that gave me that's a real step change because they were onboarding that. And they had the agents on the machine. So that was the key thing. It was almost like got the CrowdStrike login, could use the Spotlight, could use the Falcon Complete. We then shortly afterwards put identity protection in there, and that gave us a real kind of wide view of what was going on there. It was a really good reference tool to anything that's happened in the network. So anything that we see from any of our other sources, we go to CrowdStrike to double check. And then from there, we have a really good baseline, and we can use that to improve.
Fantastic. And I think, yeah, as you talk to there, obviously what we see from an adversary perspective is obviously that abuse of valid credentials and credential-based attacks that exist out there. We see adversaries taking advantage of those things against that backdrop of the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Yeah.
So that addition for organizations that maybe are just consuming, let's say, an endpoint capability from CrowdStrike at the moment, to couple that with identity really does start to, I guess, drive maturity and extend, certainly from a Falcon Complete perspective, that visibility beyond the endpoint to deal with those identity-based threats. A really good point you raised.
Yeah, and it's really key because I would say probably about 90% of our threats at the moment are that come are, as you say, credential-based, and the CrowdStrike really kind of allows us very quickly to identify whether it's a false positive or not, and that massively reduces the time in which we can kind of strike it out or put some further action on it. Very
good. And you talked about the team that you have, and if you look at or if you get information from other sources, you then validate with CrowdStrike. How many people roughly have you got? And was that a driver, I guess, really to look at maybe out-tasking, I guess, the 24/7 capability function?
Yeah, without giving too much away, I would say that for a company of our size, we have a well-resourced security team. Within Norgine, we have we rely on a couple of key partners, both technological, process, and people. So what I would say is that we are very good at detecting the stuff and reacting to the stuff, and always improving in time as well. So Norgine operates across multiple countries. We have multiple partners, and so therefore our ability to react and respond is all kind of driven from a kind of central cybersecurity team. But we have lots of people as you kind of go out from the core who are able to kind of feed into that process.
Understood. And I think something that when I'm talking with sort of clients and even prospects in my role, sort of leading that go-to-market piece of Falcon Complete across the EMEA region, I think sometimes it's quite hard for organizations to get their head around how they're going to work with Falcon Complete and obviously the roles and responsibilities. But it sounds like you've got almost the working down, shall we say, of the Falcon Complete team delivering on that detection and response capability. You have access, obviously, to the platform to verify other signals that exist within your environment. But then you've got a team of people that are then adding context and driving, obviously, other elements of a security operation kind of across the globe. Is that kind of a fair summary?
Yeah. So in terms of something cropping up on the radar, so to speak, we have an alert that gets checked, it's referenced through CrowdStrike, and then it's kind of triaged in that way. So to be honest, when it first happened, everyone just wanted to get onto CrowdStrike, and lots of people looking at CrowdStrike, looking at the same thing. And really what we've got now is a case of, we get the right people looking at the right information on CrowdStrike, and then there's something that needs to be escalated that goes straight to the CrowdStrike team. And the CrowdStrike team are there as our kind of outside eyes looking in, and we have people inside on the inside eyes looking out. So we have a good kind of checks and balances and responsibilities in terms of making sure that those kind of that trust and verify process is put in place.
Very good. Very good. And you mentioned, obviously, there are modules in which that are managed by the Falcon Complete team, like Spotlight, for example. So I guess one of the functions and things that your teams would be doing is obviously addressing that module and the good information that sources for you, and then driving that hygiene element and that sort of capability around vulnerability management yourselves. Is that pretty accurate, or would you?
Yeah, I suppose a big debate I have with any CISO forum that happens at the moment is kind of consolidation of tools. There are lots of tools in place, kind of doing lots of different things, and you put all your eggs in one basket, or do you kind of go for multiple approach? I think the approach that we're taking is very much the trust and verify. It's like any journalistic news source. You don't rely on one piece of information. You need to have two pieces of information from a diverse source in order to create a credible threat picture. And that's exactly what we're doing with a lot of the CrowdStrike technologies. One's not in priority of another. It's the fact that they're on an equal platform and an equal plate, so that what we're able to do is trust and verify information on two different sources. So, for example, you mentioned Spotlight. We do have other vulnerability management scanners in there, but it's enable that rich information, making sure it's relevant, it's person, and it's just not another tool for the sake of another tool. It kind of complements the security architecture we're trying to drive.
Very good, very good. And so switching gears slightly, just talking about future and future states and all those types of things, are there any things that you're looking at kind of at the horizon and thinking, I need to be thinking about that particular dynamic or element or any particular topic that you think that you should be sort of addressed or you're concerned about, whether it comes to AI or some of those other big buzzwords that obviously are flying around in our industry at the moment?
Yeah, I think so AI is an interesting one. I think to me, it's kind of split in two areas. First of all, it's kind of generative AI within the office environment. It's people saying, I've got to write a document, but I haven't got enough time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on to ChatGPT and just copy and paste my Word document, put it into ChatGPT, print it all out, job done. You don't know where that data has gone. That data that is, and then it becomes a kind of DLP type issue, but also using AI to kind of scan stuff for kind of things like regular expressions and words, but also how those words are structured within a document, and can it kind of scan that document to say, well, actually, this is probably confidential information. You don't want people knowing about this. I think a lot of people write stuff and they're like, well, but also having something in the AI to say, well, that should be confidential, turn or public, or whatever grading you should use. I think there's some work to do on that. But I think on the industrial process as well, you kind of have the industrial AI, and I think that's the really exciting area, because a lot of production facilities are kind of like standalone. You have one machine that does this and another machine that does that, and it's not, the whole production process can be slightly disjointed. But usually you've got an Ethernet cable sticking in somewhere to say, this machine's not burning out, or nothing's in the red. But it's all about how you make those production processes more efficient, more linked up, and of course that makes the production process cheaper. It makes it more efficient, but also there are new threats and vulnerabilities that come into place, in the sense that you've now networked every single one of your production machines up, and especially in our world, there is strict regulation in terms of composition of how things are made. and if that's deviated, and it's the same with things like food security as well. You know, if you're making baked beans and the mixture goes wrong, it could have some adverse effects later on. So I don't want to go too much into baked beans going wrong, but I think certainly
right.
you can certainly see how the network production process is something that is a new challenge, especially within the cyber world.
Yeah, for sure. No, really good points there as well. And so I guess starting to bring the conversation to a little bit of more of a close. If you were, let's say, to give advice to, let's say, a young budding CISO, what advice would you give that sort of young budding CISO or a security professional as to how they should carry themselves and what you've learned and some of the key things over your experience?
I think the key thing in all of that is when you know, CISO is a leadership position, right? And they say that you know, managers do things right, leaders do the right thing, and doing the right thing is really important. It's all about protection of data, but also I say the one thing is if you can't protect it, you've got to fix it. You know, you're in it, you fix it. But I think there's one thing is any tip for a new CISO is really understand your audience. You know, there are some immensely clever technical people out there. There are some very good people who are amazing with documents, but it's also about understanding your audience, because being a CISO, you have to talk to the HR people, you have to talk to the legal people, the compliance people, the senior leadership team, or whatever. They're in their world, and you have to enter into their world and understand what their pain points are, what the pressure points are, and understand what makes them tick, what makes them listen, because what your language is as a CISO might be different from their language. So I'll give you an example. So talk about HR, talk about joiners, movers, leavers process. They might have this wonderfully artistic, complex flow chart of how someone joins, how someone moves in a business, how someone leaves in a business. And you have to understand their process, and you have to make sure it's secure, have to make sure that Joe Bloggs, who turns up on day one, doesn't get admin access and things like that. You have to understand your audience, and I think that's really the most important thing is to think about on a daily basis when you're dealing with different business elements.
No, great points, and I think sometimes it's completely overlooked, right? Someone who's got that technical background understanding may not have that social understanding that the person sitting on the other side of the table just isn't in that same place. So yeah, really valuable insight. So is there anything else you'd like to share, Nick? I mean, are there any other things that you'd like to talk about or touch on?
Yeah, I think in terms of what CrowdStrike offers, in terms of, you know, kind of being aware, I think the key point is you know, always all, you know, the message from any CISO is always be aware. You know, don't be complacent. You know, and especially when you talk about Awareness Month, you know, there's lots of videos, there's lots of training guides or whatever. And the biggest thing in cybersecurity is the human factor. And the biggest danger that we face is being complacent, and that is clicking on that link, going to that website, doing that thing you wouldn't normally do. And I think, you know, that is our biggest challenge in terms of security. You know, we can lock down our systems, we can prevent access, but at the end of the day, it's always a hacker who's a human who tends to get into your network, and it's all about not being complacent.
Yeah, no, and I think again, something that can be completely overlooked, right? All that sort of investment money spent in sort of tooling, services, all that type of stuff. But if there isn't that awareness at the human level of understanding or looking at something, questioning something at that point in time, no matter how busy you are, and there's obviously a weakness there. So no, thank you for that.
Yes,
no, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. Hopefully, there's some real value as you've been sort of watching the conversation that you've gleaned from this. And of course, if there's anything that you'd like to pick up on, more than happy to continue the conversation with you, certainly around Falcon Complete, the CrowdStrike platform, and the way in which we help organizations sort of deliver on capabilities 24/7, 365.